Hello, everyone. This is Ted Check, Public Relations Manager for the International Foundation for Protection Officers. I'm here with Yolanda Hamblen, affectionately known as Yo-Yo. She's across the pond, as you can see from her banner. She's in the United Kingdom, and you're an advisory member of the IFPO UK. And also, the reason that we're here today is we want to talk about a new project that you're involved in that is, totally independent of what we have going on over here. But I mean, that's the nature of the IFPO. We stretch all over the world, and a lot of things are done independently, but it's all done for the benefit of our members and those who earn certificates and everyone else that's in the security industry. So, Yolanda, it's the project I'm referring to is the IFPO. Well, it's IFPOD, I guess you could say. It's a podcast, and specifically, it's the Security Circle podcast. I think is the official name of it. Is that right?
Yeah. Listen, thanks, Ted. It's super cool to be with you today. And I have to say, for our brothers and sisters in Ireland, we're actually the branch of IFPO UK and Ireland.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
And I don't want to miss them out because they are awesome. But yeah, no, super cool to be here today to talk about Security Circle podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, so I looked at it a little bit, and you've got it. It looks like you've got 3 episodes so far that are available. You got your own URL where people can see it, and I'll put that in the description once this video goes live. But yeah, you've talked with so far John Sefton, who you guys were talking about security and social media, friend or foe. I'm just looking at my notes here. Episode 2 was Dr. David Rubin's security risk management, and then Dr. Martin Gill, who was instrumental. Some people might be familiar with his name because he was instrumental in a big study that was done on security officers around the globe, and then also the I think it's OSPAs, right? The awards, prestigious security awards. So. Yeah, tell me a little bit about how this all came about.
Well, I found myself at the end of last year in between jobs and without any hurry to sort of panic about what my next move was going to be. I needed to sort of take a break, just take a stock of things, think about my next direction. And while I was off work, I was approached by a colleague of ours who was on the IFPO advisory board, Ash. And he basically said, why don't we do a podcast? And this is something that we were very finely tuned to receiving that kind of suggestion, because we were looking at ways to stand out in the industry, promote the IFPO brand and name as we really start to become known in the UK and Ireland. And it fit really well because Mike Hurst, who, as you know, is our chairman on the IFPO UK and Ireland advisory board, has always been really supportive about any initiatives that we have that tick all the boxes, focus on our brand, reach our membership, meaningful content, tick, tick, tick. And so we started to put our heads together about what it would be called. And you can imagine we had a plethora of names. We did loads of Googling. We sort of wanted to see what was out there in the market already. And we finally settled on Security Circle, with the whole kind of circle meaning community, this kind of group that we're in, and the circle is never ending. So it's a continuum of our very special security network, and of course it's about security matters and the matters that affect our people every day. Getting Martin Gill was a huge scoop because he's very busy with the OSPAs right now. They're just about to land in the UK. And there's always a huge furore on LinkedIn with all of the nominees and the award winners. I have to get myself nominated at some point, I think. Listening to Martin, and
I mean, you had him on the podcast, so that ought to count for something.
I know, but having talked to him about the awards ceremony, the whole idea was is it a good thing? Because a
Mm.
lot of people hear negative things about awards and the nepotism and maybe a lot of patting each other on the back. But Martin came up with some, and I won't blow the whole sort of scoop, but he basically said, you know, the dividends that people have individually after being just nominated for awards are phenomenal. And so it really is a good way to get noticed. And I'm hoping that people who listen to that can take that on board and think, okay, especially women in security are not very good at pushing themselves out there publicly and promoting their strengths. And so, you know, a huge drive to try and get more women to definitely take part. And I sit on a judging panel for another awards ceremony, and there's very few women applicants. So I just say personally, women, you know, you're doing a great job. We know you are. There's so few of you. Put yourself forward, get yourself nominated.
Great. So yeah, you were between jobs and you were approached by a colleague. Hey, what do you think about starting up this IFPOD? And you went to Mike. Mike gave you the green light. What did you do from there?
So we kind of sat down and thought, okay, who have we got in our network that is going to have an exciting story, be very engaged with their network? Because I think that's key. When they're engaged with their network, especially on LinkedIn, there's a lot of people interested in that individual. And so this is what led us to David Rubens. He's got a book that's just launched. So we wanted to cover, who doesn't want to cover a book launch, right?
Right,
And
sure. It's exciting.
for those people that literally are on tenterhooks with everything Dr. David Rubin says, you know, it's a case of, you know, I say, you know, in the podcast, you know, if you want a little version, a pocket notebook version of David Rubin's, buy that book and take it around with you, because it's literally him. And everything he says is makes a lot of sense. And John Sefton was the first one. Now, John Sefton's a good friend of both myself and Ash. And so really we were testing the water with John Sefton. He has a Sunday morning debate every Sunday morning, would you believe, on LinkedIn. And he poses a question and he invites debate on that subject matter. And just to give you an idea that this morning's subject matter was the air balloon above America. So
yes.
He was asking the question then, you know, does it sound suspicious to you? And of course, we're all going, yes, of course. Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Yes. And I personally think that balloon was escaping communism and seeking asylum in a far better country. And what did
we do? We shot it down. You know, I mean, come on. Why didn't we just take it in? It was defecting, so why didn't we just take it in? You know?
I'm sure there's some people under there that knew exactly where that debris is going to fall and are scooping it up right now. But yeah, so John was a good touch for us. He was kind of the sweet spot, really. We knew that if we made mistakes, it wouldn't affect our professionalism because he's a pal. And at the end of the interview, I know that Ash and we were just kind of buzzing. We were bouncing off the wall going, oh my God, that was so much fun. We need to do more. And so even though I started with Martin Gill and then David and then John, we really did do the John Sefton interview first. And it was then that we realized, hey, we just got to keep doing this.
So you plan on, how often do you plan on releasing them? Because I think you and I talked yesterday. I think it sounded like you had more that were in the can, and then you just you're going to release them once a week or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's really important to be consistent, because I think that consistency of one coming out on a regular basis, it means that, you know, you can keep your market engaged with you. I have certainly, while I have time off, because I'm interviewing as well, and I'm also, you know, supporting my other pro bono projects because I sit on an ASIS board as well. But in the meantime, there's such a lot of free time right now to get to as many people as possible. And I'm just so thrilled, for example, to say that one of the most exciting interviews I did was with Chuck Andrews.
Right.
I said that, yeehaw, Chuck Andrews. Because as you would imagine, he turned up with his cowboy hat, and to trick you, I turned up with a cowboy hat too.
Oh, did you? Oh, I'm sure he wasn't expecting that.
No, it wasn't. And it's a bit of fun. And his story about how he got into policing and how he started so young really does, give you an insight into the person that makes the man. And I think this is what we like about the Security Circle podcast, is that we're sitting down, we're intimate in the sense of, this is like not a formal Zoom meeting. It's a one-to-one. It's just me and that other person. And it's more about the how and the why than the what. And so yeah, I wanted to get it under Chuck's skin and find out who the man is. And I think the exciting thing about that podcast is that he's such a busy and successful man. He gave us his time, but also his story was pretty amazing. And there's more to come. I have another 12 recordings that I just wish the weeks would come by on Thursdays so that we could get them out. It's exciting.
Yeah. See, okay. So I was right about that. So you've been very busy. And so you're just kind of cataloging these podcasts and then releasing them, on a regular basis, but kind of that constant drip, so that you retain your audience and then of course grow it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be honest with you, I'm more comfortable sitting in your seat, Ted, than I am being on the receiving end of questions. So,
well, yeah, it is weird. And I've been in my career, because I've done some stuff with security, but I've also done stuff with journalism. So I've been on both sides of things as well. And it can be a little bit off-putting, to be the one being interviewed as opposed to the one just, throwing the questions out there.
Well, look, the other thing as well is that, with a podcast, with the security, I call them security celebrities, because they are such big brands in their own name, and they all blush when I say that, but they're giants. And, I think when you consider our membership and our broader reach, they don't have access to these giants. They don't have the network connections, maybe they don't have the familiar relationship. And so the chance of them coming across and engaging with these people would be either reading an article about them or something like this, or being at a seminar where that person's lucky enough to be there to see them. So when you think about general exposure to Chuck and David Rubins, for example, and Martin Gill, these are just such knowledgeable people that, we just want our membership to feel that sort of, instead of 6 degrees of separation, maybe just 2 degrees of separation. And they feel that they're a lot more closer. And then the idea is, with the Security Circle podcast, is that we're keeping our network very close and therefore broadening it all the time. So there's no reason why any of our members can't connect with all of these guests and follow them on their own LinkedIn profiles to look at all of the content they're putting out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that'll resonate with people, kind of that intimate, kind of relationship that they might be able to have in some way with them, and why not reach out? You might get a response back.
Yeah. And it's just like, I always say beforehand, pretend we're in the pub, we just don't have a drink in front of us. And you can imagine some people go, well, I do.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, and I was looking also at some of the other things on the website that were written kind of related to the episodes. Like, you talk about heroes. You that's the way that you view, and as you talked about them being like luminaries or giants. Heroes, you talked about leadership in the industry, highlighting some of the leaders of the field, in the field, so that others may learn. And you also mentioned mental health and well-being and career development. Can you kind of maybe touch on a few of those subjects, why those are important to you?
Yeah, so earlier on, when I mentioned about the reach and the network of these giants, and I looked at their engagement and what their subject matter expertise is, I think the key thing is, where do they fall into in the big theme of security life? And so mental health and well-being, with the IFPO Security Lives Matter, Security Minds Matter, that's a really important hashtag of ours. And we know through COVID and before COVID that, you know, our frontline operatives have been really troubled by mental health, and it was exacerbated by COVID, and we suffered a lot of losses, particularly here in the UK, with our frontline security professionals becoming the most harmed by COVID and dying. In fact, somebody whom I hired and whom I knew passed away through COVID. And I think it kind of touches home, really. And I was a security officer back in 2009 when I left the British police force. And I just thought it was going to be the most credible way for me as a woman going into an industry that was very male dominated. I thought it was the best way for me to get my credibility and start from the roots up. So it's important, I think, to say that I understand what those nighttime patrols are like, and those lonely nights when you're sitting eating on your own and there's just lack of interaction with anybody, and you know, there's scary moments. You know, I've worked in shopping malls where there's been knife incidents and rival gangs having a good old slash at each other. And I just think,
oh man,
and you know, don't get me wrong, at that time we were paid about £7.3 an hour, and my colleague was going to run to that incident, and I said, you never run to a knife incident, you don't get paid enough. We don't have guns, and you certainly aren't paid enough to go and put yourself right in the middle of harm's way, but you're there to, you know, observe and support where possible, and to intervene where it's safe to do so, but also, you know, wait for the police to turn up, and they're the ones that can act proportionately. But I think the security officer role in the UK is a lot different, but covering mental health and well-being, covering off personal development, the importance of continuing personal development as well, CPDs. A lot of our frontline people want to know about career pathways, how to better themselves, perhaps even go into other areas of security, you know. And I think when you're looking at, you know, exposing them to the likes of David Rubin's and risk management, that's going to make a lot of people think, oh wow, I'd love to do that. How do I learn about risk? You know, and guess what? The guy does courses. So I think it's just about providing opportunity. And there's so much more to come, And I have an interview with an amazing guy called Adrian Bosch. He's come back from South Africa, where in the South Africa area he was in, they suffered massive floods, lost half of the business, huge business. You had the COVID thing, and the government there decided to ban cigarettes and alcohol. I know, big eye roll moment. You think, why? You can understand why alcohol was banned, but you can't necessarily understand why cigarettes were banned. And then looting, and then the executive kidnaps, you know. And he said, you don't ever risk assess forward in a role like that, because you're dealing with it every day. And he's dealing with, you know, 30 burglaries a month. So huge amount of really high, insidious, high crime. And just listening to him and thinking, dude, you're going to get a job in the UK. You're going to be bored.
Well, he might enjoy that, you know, a change of pace.
Yeah, exactly.
A little vacation, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly right. But look, anyone that comes back from South Africa just really realizes it's just no longer safe to stay there anymore. And that's the tragic reality of things. And, you know, I spoke to an amazing guy called JJ Davies. He's what I call he's an influencer in relation to cybersecurity, but he talks a very plain language. And when you think that all of the experts I've spoken to, when I've asked them to forecast what the threat's going to be for the 2023 landscape, they're all saying data terrorism and cybersecurity crime. And so I got this guy, JJ, on, who has a followership on LinkedIn of 54,000. And he and I had an incredibly cool and frank conversation about cybersecurity and why it's so critical for businesses to get things right. And then, you know, moving on, I can't wait for this one to come out, a smashing bloke. And we talked about AI. And would you believe, in that same subject, talking about AI, we were talking about the Orville, Star Trek, just because there's so much in our creative sci-fi world that is very true to AI and how it frightens people today.
Yeah, and what I'm getting from what what you just said there is that there's so much to do in the security industry. You know, I think people initially, when they're getting into it, they think, oh well, geez, I got to put on this uniform and you know, I have to protect this property or whatever, and that's about it. But there's just a whole world out there. It's so diverse. where you can specialize in. And I think that's an amazing thing. And hopefully, through listening to your podcast and folks who follow us can kind of understand that, yeah, there is a lot I can do. I can I can get certified in various things, and I can specialize and find something that really interests me and go after it.
Yeah, I think I really want to encourage that, because whilst we know that some people in security don't necessarily want to, bounce off the walls all the time, there are some people that do, and I think I was particularly held back in up until around about 2017, and it was then that I joined a security membership, and I joined ASIS. Actually, we work quite closely together here in the UK. And regardless of what security membership you join, I can tell anybody that for me, it was life-changing. All of a sudden, I met people like me who wanted to get engaged in progressing the industry and moving it forward, and I don't know, shining a light on great stuff. And I found a mentor, and then that mentor guided me with a few things, a few pathways, and that mentorship led to me getting extra qualifications and learning, and just having that focus and having someone to listen to you, who made so much sense, really settled me down to the stage where now, several years later, I'm promoting the value of membership, all membership, because here in the UK as well, where we have some very significant inclusivity and diversity subjects to discuss, we are working across platforms on certain groups. So for example, there's a rainbow group, and that rainbow group crosses most of the security platforms, most of the security businesses and organizations and memberships. Okay. And it's the rainbow group to support and talk about matters that affect the LGBTQ plus industry, of which I'm a huge ally. And I tell you as well, I don't say that lightly. Allyship is about learning every day how to be the best ally. Is you don't just think, oh, because I know that I can be a great ally. Being an ally is an evolvement, because the language changes all the time, the terminology and what it means changes all the time. So it's just nice that we're working together, we're communicating on the same platform. But to be honest with you, the Security Circle podcast has always been a way for me to amplify the voices of those who don't have one. And so you can see the theme there works really well, and in making sure that people can be heard and listened to.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you were able to get yourself a mentor, and I think that's another thing that's very important. And I'd be willing to bet you're gonna cover that in it's probably gonna end up being a theme of probably several of your podcasts. But do you, now that you're in the position that you're in, have you had an opportunity to mentor anyone else?
Yeah, so I've been having relationships to mentor other mainly I specialize with young women professionals. And so I would say any young woman professional who wants to really make a mark in the security industry, I'm very open to mentoring. But more importantly, I think for IFPO as well, I hold a lot of webinars, and even one of the webinars, we identified that there was such a lack of Black and Asian minority ethnic men in the UK security leadership. And, whereas the front line in the UK is very diverse, very colourful, very rich. But there was such a lack of transparency around moving up, and we're a little way ahead of that yet. And there's some trailblazers, and there's some very frustrated Black men, for example, and Asian men who are just simply know they're facing discrimination on a regular basis. So more of that to come, definitely more around. Oh, we're gonna touch on. So I've spoken to two amazing headhunters, recruiters, and they're both going to come on and talk about best practice in headhunting, so that anybody looking at moving jobs can get some really great tips on what to do next and how to make the CV look great. And again, it's all about letting nutrition trickle down to those people who want to hear it. And hopefully in some way it helps.
So Yolanda, when you say headhunting, or here in the United States, I think the way that we look at it is that's someone that you would hire to help you get a job. or do you just mean just looking for a job on your own without having someone assist you in that?
I mean, both of these headhunters, I've worked with them myself, and I can highly recommend them, which is why they're coming on the show. And
Mhm.
I think also they're going to recommend that having a headhunter working for them is going to be a better career path. But also, you know, there are so many people out there who, and I've seen this from a hiring manager's position, where there's so many poor quality CVs. You
And you're
know,
talking about resumes, because
yeah.
again, here's another little difference. And I have to say that when I hear somebody with you know, a UK accent, I automatically believe whatever they say. It's so much more, you know, authoritative, and it's just believable. Anytime you hear anybody with a British accent, I just have to say that up front.
Listen, but also we're incredibly childish when any American mentions the name fanny pack, because we find that hilarious.
And I see why you would, yeah. And you know, sometimes you can turn those around so that they're not, you know, on the fanny. You can turn it around. So then what is it? A gut pack?
Well,
Um,
the thing is, we don't call the butt the fanny. The fanny is what we call the front area, you see. So that's
oh,
why, yeah, that's why it's so funny. And
okay.
I had a very endearing relationship with an American man a long time ago, and he told me he was getting ready to go out that night and he was putting on his suspenders. Well, I nearly fell on the floor, because here in the UK, suspenders are the holdups for ladies' stockings.
Oh, okay. Yeah, over here it'd be a garters. Yeah, I think.
Like
Uh,
braces.
but anyway, back to the CV. Okay, so curriculum vitae. For us here, that would be a document that could be 10 pages, 20 pages. That's like everything you've ever done. Whereas generally speaking, a resume, maybe you go to 2 pages tops. So maybe is there a difference there? When you say
I
CV, you're talking about like a resume.
Yeah, same thing, but I have to say I like your analogy better. I think when you move so long in your career and you kind of give your age away, you're thinking, my gosh, I can't put everything down in that I've done in 5 years, let alone everything I've done in 14 years. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I feel like you do need a longer CV here, but we're very much encouraged to keep it very short, very detailed, but brief,
Right.
but only a maximum of 2 pages. And so putting 15 years work on 2 pages, I think is the task itself, which is
Right.
why there are so many professional people out there offering to do that service.
Mm.
To give the candidate, you know, and look, is it worth it? If you, let's just say, pulling a figure out of the air, let's say it was 500 quid, yeah, to get your CV done, your LinkedIn profile, and everything looking super snazzy. And that lands you the job of your dreams with a pay rise and great future prospects. That's probably the best £500 you've invested in yourself. And I think that's pretty
Yeah.
much
What's the exchange rate on that?
do you know, I think it's very poor at the moment, thanks to some recent dabbling in politics our government did. But I think our exchange rate is not so far off yours, probably about $450.
Oh, okay. Okay. But
Yeah.
still, yeah. You know, yeah, you look at the benefits of it, and you know, if it works out, great. But yeah, the CV over here is something that if somebody asks you for it, you know, you should have it if you spent a long time in one field or maybe in several fields, you know, like I have. So mine's long, but I wouldn't, I mean, not whatever. It's not, I'm sure other people's is more extensive, but you know, but then yeah, you kind of have to say, okay, well, what's the most relevant stuff for the job that I'm searching for, the job that I'm applying to? What's the
Yeah.
most relevant information?
Yeah.
And
And
kind
look,
of kind of narrow it down.
it's commercially beneficial for these headhunters to come onto the Security Circle podcast as well, because we know that we're reaching decision makers in the security industry. We're reaching products, security services, security officers, security man guard, and you name it. When it goes out onto LinkedIn, it goes out to a really broad reach. But Ted, the most exciting thing, which I haven't told you about,
Yes,
is
yes.
that on day one, we attracted our first sponsor. And then on
Ah,
Thursday of that first week, we attracted a second sponsor. So actually, now it's become right from the beginning a commercial enterprise.
yeah.
We we can raise money, we can do good things with it. And I think people are seeing the value in the platform and want to put their money there. And for us, that's great. So I recorded the adverts today, and they will be going out. Well, one of them will be going out. We've got 8 podcasts sponsored now.
Okay, that's fantastic. Yeah, that is excellent. Because that's what everybody wants in the podcasting industry, as far as I understand it. You want sponsors. I mean, you want to be able to keep the project going, and let's face it, it takes money. So, congratulations. That's excellent.
Yeah, we've all been grinning like monkeys here, I tell you. It's been because we made sure that we were managing the analytics from day one. We didn't want to start producing podcasts and then think, oh my gosh, we don't know how many people are listening. So we started off right, we got the right advice, and yeah, we're quite happy with the way it's going. And it's nice, I have a very early first career as a DJ. I was working in nightclubs and on radio. And back in the day, when I was about 17, 18 years old, I left school and I did this media diploma, which was all about radio, presenting, producing, broadcasting, media, writing, journalism, all sorts of aspects.
Oh, great. Oh, that's fantastic.
So it I've kind of found a groove. I've got my favorite subject, security, and I have my old, skill of, not being too shy in front of a mic.
Right. And producing content.
Yeah.
So you're kind of bringing it all together. It's coalescing very nicely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, and Yolanda, I did want to, and you touched on this, but I wanted to ask you about your background. You said you were a police officer.
Yeah.
So that was after the DJ stint. And
yeah.
You it sounded like you went back to school and.
Well, actually, it's a pretty phenomenal story, and certainly a story that many of us shared. I had been DJing, and my last gig was international. It was in Barbados. And I knew my time was running out, in the sense of I either needed to go very professional or change and get a sensible job, buy a house, settle down. And so I came back to England, and uncannily, I just needed to have a routine operation in the hospital, nothing too serious. And when I was home recuperating, it was 9/11, and I managed to see the whole events roll out on television. And I had my first mobile phone, my first cell phone at that time. And I think because it was my first phone, I think I only had 10 numbers in it. And one was the doctor and the other one was the dentist. And I remember texting.
Important numbers.
Yeah, well, yeah, the bank as well. But I remember texting everybody that I could who had a phone to say, get in front of a TV now. You've got to watch what's happening. And I think, we all remember where we were and how we felt when we certainly saw those events of 9/11 roll out. And it was when I saw the firemen running into the building that I realized, I needed to do something more purposeful in my life. And so I decided to join the police. Due to that incident, there was a high intake of police applications, and I had started literally within 11 months of that date. I started on the 29th of September 2001. Wow. And look, that's a great career. I'm very privileged in the sense of I never had to strike anybody with my police baton once. I never had physically. I think the biggest weapon you have is your mouth, and I get it. There are very different challenges I appreciate in the States, and we see as much of your major news headlines as you do, and they're quite horrific for us, but we still face dangers and threats to life. And it isn't pleasant, and I call it like the best of times, the worst of times. But most of the time I was in the job, I was in a detective role, and I was dealing mainly with sexual offenses, as a lot of women get pushed into that area. But I knew that the police wasn't a long-term career for me. I'm far too creative. I think outside the box more. I have better suggestions. And so I wasn't that drone that was just going to go, yes, ma'am, yes, sir.
So you felt a little like hamstrung.
Wings flipped. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
wings clipped. And so that was it. My move into the security arena, I was very uncertain to begin with. I was entering into a world where I had lots of great skills, but couldn't put them all to the test. And I had restrictions as well in how I could deal with things. Whereas in the police, I had a lot more privileges. So, and then literally I just grafted. I put myself in as many situations. I switched jobs a lot. That's why I say to people who are breaking out in this career, switch jobs. Don't be ashamed, because in a few years' time, it won't mean anything. When you know you're not being appreciated where you are, you move on, you go somewhere else, and same again. Otherwise, I'd still be back in those jobs with no real future and no real money. And I think you have to just push yourself for better. And so that's what I did.
And that, that's an interesting philosophy, because like people who are older, let's just say, like my dad who's almost 80, he would tell me, like, nobody likes a fly-by-nighter, meaning, stick with a job, at least do, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, put your time in, because your next employer is going to be impressed by that. But I think these days that is not the case at all. You see people hopping, and I think that's kind of where we're at. I think that's just the reality, is that people are looking for looking to move up quickly, looking for better opportunities, and gaining experience. You can gain a lot of experience if you, like you said, put yourself out there. You can gain a lot of experience in 1 or 2 years at a particular job, and then jump on to the next one, if you need to or want to.
Yeah, I remember sitting in front of a man in an interview for a very prestigious bank here in the UK. And he kind of looked at my CV and he was very critical, and his eyes sort of squinted, and he looked at me and he said, "You haven't really stayed in a job very long, have you?" And I said, "Yeah, I see how you can see that, but I realized that those jobs weren't giving me what I needed, and so I changed jobs. And every time I changed jobs, I got a £5,000 pay rise. So can you criticize that?" And he kind of winked at me and he went, "Okay."
How about that? Yeah, he was actually impressed with that answer. Okay.
And it was the truth, because when your own employer won't support you, when your own employer doesn't have the open door for vision and creativity, when your own employer won't recognize your talent in comparison to the market, when your own employer won't give you a pay rise, you have to ask yourself a question. Yeah. Who's going to be responsible for getting this pay rise? Me. And so, only you can't rely on, In fact, I don't know if you know Baroness Karen Brady, but she's an inspirational woman here in the UK. She's actually in the House of Lords, and she started off as a very young woman managing a West Ham football club. And I think she was like 19 years old and she was a CEO. So it was something phenomenal like that. Anyway, so imagine somebody of a minority gender going into that world of football, soccer, and
right. That's what we call it over here, because we have our own football.
And managing the board, and her challenges were very tough. But I remember she said in an interview once, and it shocked me, but then I listened. And you sometimes listen and then you have to hear. You listen and then you hear. And basically, women go to her and they say, "What can I do? I'm being underappreciated where I'm working. I need a pay rise." And she turned around and she said, "Well, what have you done to go to your employer and list the justification behind why that pay rise is very deserving? Have you sat down, scoped it out, made a plan, and explained to them, rather than just sit there and think, I should receive this?" And so, yeah, I think women aren't very great at asserting themselves in that way, for sure. But I learned a lot from her. I think she was right. I think it encouraged what she was doing was empowering women to ask for what they wanted. And I would say that that's the only thing you got to do in life, especially in the security industry. If you don't know what risk assessments are, ask to learn them. Somebody will show you. If you don't know how to do X, Y, and Z, there'll be people. There's people online. There's people in membership groups. There's a huge community out there of people who just want to talk about what they do.
Oh, yeah.
Friends and family are so bored.
Yeah. I think, and I think you're right. And I think that's why you'll probably never run out of guests for your podcast, is because on one level, people enjoy talking about themselves, and on another, that I think they want to pass that knowledge along to others who need to hear it.
Hey, listen, why don't you and I do a joint interview? You can be a co-host with me. And
Oh, okay.
we need to find somebody super cool that we can interview stateside, and we can do a joint co-hosting.
Yeah, sure. I'd be willing to do that. Absolutely.
Excellent.
Yep. Yeah. I've done stuff like that in the past, in another field, because I used to cover the sport of mixed martial arts. And so I would, yeah. UFC and all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
Kind of gotten away from it, but yeah, we used to do live shows, where it would be myself and a partner, and we'd interview somebody, or that would be one segment. We'd kind of, the co-host and I would have a conversation for a while, then maybe bring a guest on, things like that. So yeah, I'd be more than happy to do that.
Great. We'll have to get our heads together and come up with something.
Sure. All right. Well, so the to kind of wrap things up here, Yolanda, so it's the web address is just ifpod.org, I think it is. Is that?
Yeah, www.ifpod.org.
Ifpod.org. Okay.
And Ted, listen, we're friends now. You can call me Yo-Yo.
I can call you Yo-Yo. All right. I didn't know that. Is that like a new thing? Because I don't know if because I've seen your name and I've seen the other videos that you've done, but then all of a sudden there's this Yo-Yo, because we started corresponding by email. I'm like, oh, is she like turning over a new tree? Now she's Yo-Yo. She wasn't before, but
no, I guess really, because so many people in the industry know me as Yo-Yo that
okay.
In the podcast they all called me Yo-Yo, and yes, it probably shows that there's a certain level of friendship there, but I look, even when I joined the police, the chief of police came up to me on my attestation day, which is the day we all got sworn in to pledge our allegiance to the Queen.
Mm-hmm.
God rest her soul. And he came up, shook my hand and said, oh, I hear you're the one they call Yo-Yo. Then I was PC Yo-Yo. And so I guess it's just stuck. And so when something sticks, it's for a reason. And it's something people are comfortable with. When I'm working in a professional environment, clearly I don't ask to be called Yo-Yo.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah, but there's no, I think, you're professional, but there's a certain playfulness to that, and so yeah, I think that's good. All right, Yo-Yo.
Thanks, Teddy.
Yeah, I haven't been called that in a long time. What did Obi-Wan Kenobi say? Now that's a name I haven't heard in a long time. Yeah, but yeah, probably since I was 10.
It's been really enjoyable. I usually enjoy less being this side of the fence, but it's been so much fun with you, Ted. And
hopefully it was bearable at the very least.
Connect on LinkedIn, come and listen to some podcasts, and give us your feedback. Seriously, we're always open to feedback, so we're very open for you to engage with us. And have a great year, 2023. Yo.
Oh, absolutely, and we'll keep corresponding, and we'll do that together. The podcast that you were talking about, for sure.
For sure.
All right, Yo-Yo. We'll talk to you later.
Cheers, Ted.
Bye-bye.
Bye.